All right. It is 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. My name is Simmy Hundal. I am calling in from Houston, Texas for another edition of the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. We have an amazing panel today that I'm really looking forward to diving into conversation with. And I'll start right there. Again, the theme is civil disobedience this month. So I'm looking forward to conversations about that topic today. Let me start with President Felicia Moore, who is the president of the City Council of Atlanta. And she also has served as city council member for 20 years prior to becoming the president in 2019, January 2019. And she has served in a number of other roles as well with other entities. It's a pleasure to have you on, President Moore.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Likewise. Next, we have Dr. Gomez, Dr. Hugo Gomez, calling in from Mexico City. He has a PhD in industrial engineering and has worked in several industries, including energy and consumer goods. It's a pleasure to have you on, Dr. Gomez.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to talking to all of you.
Likewise, likewise. And to continue the diversity in geography, we have Brian Halstead from Miami, Florida, who is a real estate broker, and he happens to be a client of Phoenix Risk Management. It's great to have you here, Brian, again for another March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
For sure. So let's dive right in. Starting with the prepared questions, President Moore, why don't I start with you? The Representative John Lewis, rest in peace, encouraged getting into good trouble or speaking truth to power. Many of us are hesitant to engage in marching or protests in person with the prevalence of COVID-19. Other than in-person demonstrations, what does good trouble look like today, and how do you encourage ordinary citizens to play a part?
Well, a good trouble looks like whether we're in COVID or not. So if you're not going to protest, and I always tell people that good trouble is getting in trouble for something good. And so if you're not going to protest, and even if you do, protests are a really excellent way of calling attention to what's going on. But it's only part of it. And if you study John Lewis's life, what he did, if you study his life and what he did in the civil rights movement, it had a strategy around it. So you have to have a goal, and then you need to have a strategy. It wasn't protest for protest's sake, it was strategy. And I believe that one way that people can get in good trouble is, first of all, knowing who their elected officials are, and making sure the elected officials know who they are. That's the main thing. And you do that by constantly contacting them. Now, some of them are more responsive than others, but you make them respond. You email them, you call them, you hit them up on social media, you find them in the grocery store if you happen to run into them, but you make sure that they know who you are so they will respond to you and that you can get what you need to get to them. You've got to speak truth to power, but you got to speak. You've got to take advantage of any opportunity you may have to get public comment, whether it's in writing, whether it's in person. A lot of times people don't feel that that helps or that matters, but to an elected official, it really matters because we want people to vote for us. And if we see a large number of people who feel a certain way, who are our voters, who are our constituents, it is going to get your attention as an elected official because you want to be reelected. And you want to make sure that you're serving the people. So there's always ways to get in good trouble other than marching. And I would say if you are one who will do the march, thank goodness for you getting out there and protesting, but also understand you've got to affect policy and drive policy and make sure your elected officials not only hear you from you, but know who you are.
Thank you, President Moore. And when I heard you list off the different ways to communicate with elected officials, I was thinking to myself, have I done all of those things with President Moore? How's my
Yes,
report card
you do
looking?
it very well. I have about 20 emails from you. And so I know you very well now. I know you.
Thank you for being patient with me. Actually, I want to do a quick follow-up question. You talked about doing individual reaching out communication with your elected officials. Would you recommend that there be a combination of reaching out as an individual as well as joining like-minded groups so that you can approach elected officials in larger numbers?
Almost definitely. Because if you get a group that has the same goal that you have, you all can be communicating to elected officials or people in power who can make those differences all at the same time. So yes, it's good to have that individual contact, but it's also good for those group contacts. And it's also good when elected officials hear from a group. Maybe it's a resolution from a group or a letter from a group that's signed by several people saying we all feel the same way. That's also very powerful. And again, knowing what your goals are, and if you have people who can craft the policy or either some sort of semblance of what you would like the law to be changed or a law included, some sort of policy, then you have something to go to the elected official. Some of the elected officials are a little bit more workhorse than others. Some of them need to be handed things, and some of them may need to be handed the legislation almost ready to go, where they just need to go to the law department or their legislative policy people and tweak it to fit their situation. So you need to know what your goal is and also make sure that it can be put in a succinct way in written policy that you would want that elected official to proffer for you.
That gives good information to me, and that's something I hadn't thought about, actually thinking about drafting legislation when you actually reach out to.
And I will add that a lot of people don't have to recreate the wheel, depending on what it is. Say it's voting rights. You don't have to recreate the wheel. We got Google and all these other search engines. Go in there and you can find model legislation that other cities or other places have done, or either other organizations have drafted to help kind of move it along.
Great point. Thank you, President Moore.
You're welcome.
Let me get a voice from Mexico involved. Dr. Gomez, let me ask you a question. Mexico has a history of civil disobedience and taking to the streets over several issues, including the irregularities associated with the controversial 2006 national presidential election, the enforced attack, abduction, and disappearance of 43 students from the Ayotzinapa teaching school in Iguala in 2014 by corrupt police officers. What and how are Mexican people protesting these days?
Well, these days, this year, by far the largest organized group protesting in Mexico, it's been a series of women groups. They organize in an unprecedented way for this past March 8th, the International Day of Women's Day. And they march in the main cities of Mexico, all across the country. But only Mexico City, we have a march of more than 100,000 women marching through the main streets of Mexico. And they organize for the following day, for March 9th, what they call a Day Without Women. And we have millions of women not getting out of home, not going to work, not going to schools, not going to the streets. And so just to give you some idea, there were over 200,000 schools without female teachers. Okay. We have more than almost 1 million employees just in the government agency not showing up to work. And so those two demonstrations organized by women, all of them against crimes against women, violence against women has been growing in Mexico, unfortunately. I would say that the other front, most recent front of protesting, is another group of citizens protesting against this new government is new because it's about 2 years, and the changes they have introduced, the new policies they are bringing, for many people are seen as very much aligned with a movement that is associated with something called the Sao Paulo Forum, which in different Latin American countries have been trying to establish a sort of socialism, communism agenda in the way of running the country. And so these other protesters, because of COVID, they have been doing their march by car. And so around 45,000 people every either Saturday or Sunday in the main cities of Mexico formed a very long caravans of cars beeping their horns going around touring the cities. And those are the two main manifestations we have on this kind of protests.
Thank you for that. And that's really interesting. When I think of civil disobedience, I usually think of the presence of something different. But what you talked about in that first demonstration is the absence of women actually going to work, going about their daily lives and seeing what impact that they have and bringing attention to a very important issue. It's a really novel, for me, in my experience, approach to protesting.
Yeah, it was many different organizations have come up with measurements of the impact that had on either the slowdown of the economy, all the work lost in that day, and more than anything else, it was something very well organized by this women's movement, because most of the large companies, government and school, they went along with that, and they encourage women that they will be freely, if they didn't want to show, to work, to school, to do their whatever responsibility was, they will not be held against them. They will not deduct the salary pay or whatever. And so it really raised the conscience about what's going on.
That's so great to hear that the employers were on board as well to encourage these protests and to shed light on a very important issue. Thank you for that, Dr. Gomez. And now let's turn to Miami, Florida. Brian, I've got a question for you. Thank you, before we go to Brian, thank you to all the viewers that are joining on board. Again, this is the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. The theme for this month, is civil disobedience. And so, Brian, I want to talk to you about civil disobedience for you as an immigrant to the United States. Do you feel an obligation to abide by laws and regulations, even if you disagree with them morally or ethically, more so than your born in America neighbors? Why?
Well, I do, first, I must say, feel an obligation not only to myself, but to my fellow Americans to obey the law. You know, that is paramount. And prior to me moving and living here in America, I work on ships as a Marine officer. So I had that international experience of what the law entails and living and working with different people. So I'm exposed to different views of morality and ethics as well. So when I finally settled here in the United States, the concept of different morality and different ethics was not foreign to me. So I quickly acclimated. I quickly became comfortable with the customs here. You know, I quickly became comfortable and make this my home. And as a real estate broker, I learned also not only the laws, the core laws, which guides, you know, a real estate agent, but I also learned ethics. And as it applies to being a realtor, it's a little bit more than law. It works in conjunction to the law. And in real estate, we have this we have this term that we use called culpable negligence, in which someone could be ignorant of the law, but breaking the law, you could still be held accountable. So it's very important to us to, from a real estate point of view, and in a broader sense, in general, where the law is concerned, to really follow that. On the topic of morality, I mean, I grew up in a Christian nation. Morality is very high on the spectrum, following the Christian beliefs, but a lot of it is pretty much practiced and obeyed. And when you make a transition here to the United States, you find that Christian values and Christian beliefs are also very strong. But for us as human beings, it can be quite difficult, you know, being imperfect in following these laws. And we have to be, I mean, these morality attitudes that we try to make a part of us, but we do the best we can, and as imperfect human beings, and try to be morally upright. But I think it's important that laws and morality and ethics work in conjunction with each other, so that we can have a most favorable outcome.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That's a really interesting experience that I'm learning about you, Brian, that you were actually on the waters and you served as a Marine, someone who was working at sea, and it seems like you interacted with many different cultures, which guides your experience with diversity and differences in beliefs. Thank you for that, Brian.
You're welcome.
As we transition to the next section, which will be the I agree or I disagree to a statement that I will be making, and I'll be asking all of the panelists that. I want to remind the attendees that if you have any questions for our panelists, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A, and I will try to pose them to our panelists, as many as possible. So let's go ahead and go on to the rapid fire section, which again will be something where I make a statement, an opinionated statement, and then I'll ask the panelists if they agree or they disagree. Well, today we've gone international with our friends and neighbors in Mexico, or our neighbor in Mexico joining us, Dr. Gomez, thank you for doing that. So let me start with the Mexico-US relationship. The first statement is, Mexico and the US are important allies and trading partners to one another. Let's start with President Moore.
Agree.
Okay. Dr. Gomez?
Agree.
Brian?
Agree.
Okay. Second statement, the US has a fair immigration system. President Moore? Disagree. Dr. Gomez?
Disagree.
Okay, Brian?
It's a really tough one, that question. The yes or no. I disagree.
Third statement, the US-Mexico border wall is an effective way to better detect and prevent the illegal entry of aliens into the United States. President Moore?
There's no middle ground, so I will disagree.
Okay. Dr. Gomez?
Disagree.
All right, Brian?
Disagree.
All right. So we're all in agreement. So in agreement, meaning between the three so far in the statements. And then if there is a disagreement, then we will expand on that. The fourth statement, Mexico does not do enough to resettle asylum seekers in Mexico. President Moore?
I would say agree.
Okay. Dr. Gomez?
I disagree.
Okay. Brian?
I agree.
Okay. Let's start with President Moore. Could you expand 30 seconds on why you feel the way you do about that?
Well, I guess it's extrapolation of the fact that I think that the reason we're having a lot of people from Mexico come to the U.S. is there are some things in Mexico that they don't want to stay there. And so I think if the Mexican government could strengthen itself, perhaps more people would stay.
Okay, thank you, President Moore. Dr. Gomez, you disagree. Why is that the case?
Well, I disagree because what Mexico has is an approach, very open approach to be able to assist people from different countries. As a matter of fact, one of the crises we are dealing with is that we have dozens of immigrants from Central South America and even from Africa coming through the south border and trying to make it to the US. And so it's not only the Mexicans needed to immigrate, but also the people from all these different countries. And so far, Mexico, even though it doesn't have too much means to be able to take care of them, they're handling them, they're taking care of them.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. Brian, how do you feel about this?
Well, I agree that Mexico could do more as far as resettling people who are sent back from the United States, or even to keep people from coming into the United States. In line with what Dr. Moore says, providing more facilities, more opportunities for people to show them that in their country they can make it just as much as in the United States. A country is as great as its people, and the Mexican people, I believe in general, one of my biggest clients is Mexican, are very great people. And the United States is a wonderful country, but it's not the only country in the world. And people can really make their country great and make it more appealing, so that immigration can be normalized. So I think almost a lot of the countries can do more, especially those countries who are sending a lot of people, people risking their lives to get to the United States, which we live here and we know it's not all a bed of rose living here. So you got to work hard, and it's difficult. So so therefore it's important if we create those opportunities in our own countries or in their own countries, so that people will want to stay there.
Thanks, Brian. President Moore, you wanted to add it on?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think Dr. Gomez makes a good point. I was just talking about Mexicans wanting to get to the U.S., but they have the added burden of being on the way to the U.S. and having to have other countries. And so I would say the same for the other countries, that, if we could help those in South America to better stabilize all of those countries, then people would not have to get to Mexico and then try to get to the U.S. I think we both are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is just a microcosm of exactly the spirit behind the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement, where we're having robust conversation about topics in a respectful way from people that come from very different perspectives. So I love what I'm hearing. Thank you for your insights on what you just shared about the Mexico-US relationship. Let me move on to the China-Western world relationship, which has unfortunately been deteriorating rapidly this year. Let me start with the first statement. It is the right thing to do for officials to call COVID-19 the China virus. President Moore.
Disagree.
Dr. Gomez?
Disagree.
I'm sorry, did you say disagree or agree?
Disagree.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Disagree.
Thank you. Second statement, government officials should continue to blame China for COVID-19 before the pandemic is brought under control. Same order. President Moore?
Disagree.
Okay. Dr. Gomez,
Disagree.
Brian?
The question again?
No problem. The statement is government officials in Western countries should continue to blame China for COVID-19 before the pandemic is brought under control.
I agree.
You agree that they should continue to blame China, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, they already, you know, the virus is already in their country, but the root of the virus, the problem, the reason why they have a virus is because it left China and now posing a health threat across the entire world. You know, that cannot be overstated. You know, they should do everything they can. I mean, China is also facing their own dilemma with the virus. I mean, their own problems. And each government must do everything to help their people. But I don't think it's a stretch to continue to blame China.
Thank you, Brian, for your opinion. President Moore, can you share? Why do you
Well,
disagree?
I mean, I think that we all understand where it originated from, and that's where it originated from. My only concern is if we continue to blame China, we also have to blame ourselves for what we're doing to mitigate it on our own shores. And unfortunately, I don't think that we're doing a good job here in the U.S. So to the extent that it is spreading in the U.S., we have a blame in that as well. You know, your neighbor can have a fungus growing in their grass, and it's the neighbors that started the fungus, but you are responsible for stopping it from getting in your yard. And so I think that there's a responsibility to be had. And I also don't like the fact that when we continue to talk about China, some people take that as a opportunity to target Asian Americans, thinking that they are somehow carriers of the virus just by virtue of the fact they're from China, most of them from Korea or other places, but they're Asian and they sort of lash out at them. So I think we need to start now at the point where it's already gone. We know where it came from. We know that what they didn't do to warn the world, but now it's time to take responsibility for what you're doing to eradicate it on your shores.
Thank you, President Moore. And Dr. Gomez, why do you believe that we should pause the blame game against China for COVID-19 before we deal with it at home?
Because it doesn't serve any purpose. I mean, once you have understood the origin and the causes, and unless you can prove that it was a deliberate effort for one country to damage or to do harm to somebody else. But on one hand, we celebrate globalization and mobility of people and free trade everywhere. And then if something happened in one part of the world and people through all that, I would say, all that facility to move from one place to the other, okay, in the same day being in one point of the world and being in the other one. We blame the origin of that to where that health situation started. I think it doesn't serve any purpose. Once you have understood that, you need to work on preventing, on solving the issue. It doesn't do any good to blame them on them. That's my point of view.
Yes, and I'd like to add a little bit more to the point that the origin of the virus in China, we don't know if it was, you know, on purpose, even though that's strongly debatable. We know China government is communist, is a different form of government. Not to say that it's better, it's worse. But we know things comes from the top. They hushed it for a long time, you know, before they revealed to the world that, you know, this was probably, this was a serious issue. And in the sense of not saying that China is to be blamed, a point the doctor brought out that, you might target, Chinese Americans. And I mean, this is a real threat, of course, but I don't think that should be the factor in why we shouldn't. We should keep the pressure on China. Why I believe that is vitally important is because something else can come out of there, that affects the world. They're a huge population and they have huge resources backed by the government. So we should never really underestimate the threat that something like this can pose to us. I mean, this pandemic is the perfect example. So I think governments of the world should continue to say, hey, this is what you caused and we're watching now, and we don't want this happening again. That's just why I feel it's important to keep on mentioning it, not to say that we're pointing our fingers at our fellow Americans, whether they're Chinese or from any other origin.
We're going to have to end it there, but it's the exact spirit of the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement that I was hoping for: respectful disagreement and robust conversation to better learn different perspectives, now from around the world, which I'm very excited about. Brian Halstead in Miami, Florida, thank you so much for rejoining us here.
You're welcome, Simmy. It's a pleasure, as always.
For sure. President Moore in Atlanta, Georgia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a great discussion and glad to meet you all.
Likewise, likewise. Dr. Gomez in Mexico City, Ciudad de Mexico. Thank you for joining.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. Viewers, thank you for joining. You will gain access to this video and all the other videos that we've had for the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement on our Facebook group. We're going to have another one Tuesday following the first Monday of every month leading up to Election Tuesday on November 3rd. Next month, it will be September 8th. I hope to see you there at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we'll be talking about political engagement with our panelists. Thank you so much and have a great Tuesday evening.
Thanks
you.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Adios.